Hi guys, Spink here. This is another Hardercore playthrough of Kerbal Space Program. This time we are going to be featuring the Kerbal Operating System mod, which is the Scriptable Autopilot. Let's get started. Okay, first thing, let's go through the options that I've selected. We are playing on hard mode, which is going to decrease the rewards to 60% and increase penalties to 200%. This will also impact the upgrade costs of the facilities. We do not have the COM network enabled because I'm using RemoteTech, simply because that's just what I'm familiar with. I don't have anything against COM network. We are in the Advanced tab. We have all of the force limits selected so that our Kerbals and craft can be destroyed in all manner of interesting ways. And we are using the Earn Your Stripes mod. One of the things that I like about this is it enables, or it allows us to replace the starting crew, which kind of gives each playthrough a little fresher feel since we don't have the same guys all the time. Anything else? I don't think there's anything else that needs covered. All right. So this is going to be using the Unkerbaled Start mod, which is my mod. And let's take a look at the tech tree and I'll explain what that's all about. The first thing you'll notice compared to the stock tech tree and the community tech tree is it has been de-squished. The stock tech tree is kind of all down in this corner for whatever reason. And what I've done is I've brought it over, starting over on the left side, since anything that's going to be added will be on the right side, so that makes a little more sense. And I've also expanded it to take advantage of the full vertical palette that we have here. So it should be less squished, although it's still pretty dense in places. It does look like there's more nodes here, and there are not a great deal. I've removed some of them, but primarily they've just been rearranged. So for instance, there was all of this nuclear power technology nodes up here. Those have been moved down into this section here so that they come in off of electronics and heat management and whatnot instead of coming out of your rocket line, which really doesn't make a great deal of sense in my opinion. Also, we had at the bottom for the community tech tree, there was a colonization and a logistics line. I've combined those and brought them in off of life support, so they come in off survivability. And that is your survivability and colonization line here. Next, we have a new line for the Soviet-style reentry pods. I don't think they really have a niche in the stock tech tree because there's always something better in the same node, so there's really no point in ever using them. So I've made this new line for them because they are cruder and cheaper. You're allowed to get them earlier. So whereas the regular command module comes in on tier 5, the Soviet-style reentry pod, come in pink, is available on tier 4. And they're also half price of the normal cost for the tier. So I think this gives them an actual useful niche should your play style and setup that you're using. Sometimes that could actually be an attractive option. The downside to it is it doesn't lead anywhere. So any points you put into these doesn't help you out anywhere else on the tree. So I thought that was maybe an interesting trade-off. We have expanded the two lines that the stock tech tree breaks rocketry into and kept that going. So now we have a line for your boosters. Essentially, this is your power line. And then the line up here is your specialist rocketry. This is where you have all of the alternate technology ones like the OMS. And also this is your engines that are optimized for vacuum. All right, I think that is pretty much it for the structure of the tech tree. So now let's look at some of the things that are specific to the unkerbled start. We're going to be starting with the Probodobodine Staputnik, and for an engine we're just going to have a single solid rocket booster. This is a 0.625 meter format. This particular one is from the Restock Plus mod. If you have that mod installed, it replaces the RT1 that I have in my mod, which is just a rescaled RT10. The first liquid engine you get is this new LVT05, which is a rescaled T30. And again, this is a 0.625 meter format. The entire rocketry line has essentially been scooted up anywhere from 2 to 3 tiers or so. So the Reliant and the Swivel that you get early in the stock game have been moved all the way up to tier 5 heavy rocketry, and everything else has kind of been normalized around those. This was done so that the rocket power is always going to be the pain point. That's the intent, so that you're always not quite having enough power to do what you would like to do as soon as you like to do it. And the intent of that is to kind of encourage you to develop the Kerbin sphere of influence with the moons there before heading out to Duna. And to help balance that out, most of the other parts have been moved up. So for instance, docking ports are moved up so that you'll be able to do stations sooner. The couplers and whatnot and have been moved up. And I think that's pretty much it for the tech tree as far as things I wanted to cover. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have for contracts. I have the stock contracts disabled with no stock contract mod, and I have replaced those with contract packs just because I prefer them, and I think a custom tech tree is a better fit with the custom contract packs over the stock ones. I use SETI contracts as my career driver still, even though the old SETI mod is kind of ridden off into the sunset. I like the contracts. I think it really drives the career really good, the way I like to play. So the first thing we're going to do is try to get an altitude record of 18 kilometers. We are using FerramAerospace mod. So that's going to make getting into orbit quite a bit more difficult. We'll be lucky to get 10K probably out of this. If we had, without Ferram installed, it would probably go all the way out of the atmosphere. All right, so we're going to take our Probodobodine, and we are going to add the KR2042 scriptable control system. This is what drives our Kerbal scripting, Kerbal operating system. We are going to set the boot file to boot.ks, and I'm going to take the disk space and put that at maximum. Now I believe the disk space is in characters, and I always bring that up to maximum because the way I write scripts is not to use the fewest number of characters, it's for readability. Okay, so we have our scripting system, our little CPU there, and we're going to add our new mallet solid rocket booster. This is one of the new restock parts. This is the big retexturing mod, which is awesome, as you can tell. And we're going to grab our fin, and I'm going to put, say, 3 fins on here. Electrical, we need some batteries. We'll go with 2 of these. And our science experiment is the thermometer. We'll stick with 1 of those. And we will need a communications antenna. because you cannot use Kerbal operating system unless you have a, well, you can, but you have to have a communications link for the upload of the scripts that I'm using, due to the nature I'm using it. Okay, so this this engine, this SRB, does not have a gimbal on it, so it can't steer. Our fins do not have any control surfaces, they can't steer. And our probe core does not have any SAS or anything like that, so it can't steer. So our only way of providing any stability to this thing is we're going to have to tilt our fins. Let's see, come on you. There we go, about so. And that is going to cause our rocket to spin as it picks up speed. And we do not want to have a thrust to weight ratio too high, or we're just going to end up battering against the atmosphere and losing a lot of our power that way. So I'm going to set this at about 1.57. That's close enough. I'm going to 1.5 is kind of what I'm aiming at there. And I'm going to name this Test 1. Come on. Here we go. Test 1. Whoop. Need to put a space in there. That matters. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. Okay, so there is Test 1, our first rocket. We've got everything we need on it. I am using Kerbal construction time, so building a rocket takes time, so we're not going to get into orbit on day 3, as you oftentimes do in stock. So it's going to take 11 days to build this. Another thing that I have here is the scrap mod, which is a part failure mod, and our safety rating is terrible, so great. So did I click the button yet? Let's see, VAB, okay. So launching adds it to the build queue, and we go out. All right. So we will warp to continue to build our craft. Oh, one more thing. We are using the monthly budget mod for this playthrough. So instead of getting our funding through completing contracts, we're going to get it every month. And that is determined by the amount of reputation we have. And you can see at start, our next budget is going to be 0, and we have current costs of $33,000. You have to pay upkeep or costs on all of your facilities. You have to pay salaries for your Kerbals that you have, and you have to pay a cost for every active vessel. So we need to get our reputation up before the end of the month, or we're going to go bankrupt immediately. One thing I have done is started with 100,000 funds, so that we got the first 3 months covered, but we do have a pretty serious issue of getting our reputation up pretty quickly. I do have it set to it will also decay reputation. There we go. I didn't have it set. So every month our reputation is going to decrease by 10%. So not only do we have to get our reputation up, we have to continually increase it, or we're going to lose money. And you can actually go bankrupt using this mod, and that is the end of your space program. And I think that's just a dandy way to fail. So let's roll out our test 1. All right, we're on day 12 already. I haven't launched anything yet. And we'll warp to the morning. All right. And we will launch. Okay, now one of the restrictions I set for myself is that I'm not allowed to control an unmanned craft at all, except through the Kerbal operating system and through the flight computer that's part of RemoteTech. So there's a bunch of text flying by, and our solid rocket booster failed to ignite. So one of the things that happened as this text was flying by is we did a science experiment. And there is our science here and now. So it did the science experiment on the launch pad, and it transmitted it back. And it's continuing. You can see it's continuing to do the science experiment, and it does that every 20 seconds. And we'll look at how that's done in just a minute. All right, so our SRB failed to ignite, so we're going to recover it. This is from the OScrap mod. Did I fail to push the button? That's not part of the OScrap mod. That's part of my brain. All right. So we actually ended up with 1.4 science. Yay. So our SRB failed to ignite because its reliability was so low. What can we do to improve the reliability of our parts? One, every time you build a new one, it's a new generation, and that increases the reliability. Second thing you can do is you can fly tests with them, or perform tests. Like what we just did could be considered a test. So now our safety rating is up to 8 because we tested our parts. Now, it wasn't intended to be a test, it just worked out that way. But as things get more complex, we may want to be doing tests like that, where we just go out, put it on the launch pad, and then just bring it back in, just so that we can basically do an integration test with all our parts. Okay, so we're going to be able to build this thing again. But what we have now with the Scrapyard mod that is a prerequisite for OScrap, where are we at? Down here, we have all of these parts that we just built still here, so we can reuse them. And they're now all considered tested as well. So this has a previous use. And since we already have the parts, it's now going to only take us 1 day to get this thing back out on the launch pad. So we will launch him again. And all right, warp to complete, just 1 day this time. Day 13, still haven't got anything off the ground. Roll him out. Still plenty of daylight, all right. Ding. It's nice how this ties in with Kerbal Alarm Clock. All right, once again, so it's downloading files, and it's beginning a countdown. And you see it also again is going through the science, but since we've already got this science, it's dumping it. It's not going to bother transmitting 0 value science. So this should get off the ground this time. There we go. All right, and you see, there we go. We're immediately doing more science. We're starting to get our spin going. That's just saying there is no SAS on it. I have the script turning SAS on at this point, or RCS as well too, but it doesn't have any effect since we don't have any. Oh, we've got a real nice straight ascent going here. So we've got our first 2 bits of science. We're up to 4.8. We need 5 to open a node, so playing on hard mode is a little challenging. Really starting to Get a little haywire here now that we're going faster, I think. Looks like we might break 10K. Nope, not quite. Flamed out. It's not a huge deal to make 10K. But we're nowhere near the 18K we need for our first contract. But we do have some world first milestones. I tend to ignore these usually, but now that I'm using monthly budgets and my money is based on the reputation, all of these little reputation gains from these little milestones is kind of our bread and butter now. So you can see that's brought our reputation up to, I have no idea what that is, but if we go back to monthly budgets, you see now we have a $30,000 budget, or 30,000 funds. So we're almost break even at this point. But we're going to need to do better than that if our space program is to be successful. Okay. So he's falling right back down. Now he's still doing his science script every 20 seconds. So if we should happen to have gone over a different biome, we potentially could have picked that up for as long as we have electrical charge. Looks like we are going to splash into the water. I wonder if we're going to pick something else up. Oh wow, he's really going nuts now. All right. Well, let's see what else we got. All right. So you may also have noticed these achievements that came up. Let's see, there's all of our records. These are from the Space Age mod, and it keeps track of all of your achievements, all of your launches and whatnot along the way, which is kind of handy because then you can go back and look at everything that's happened. So if we look at this, there's both the chronicle and the achievements. Achievements to keep track of the total launches, you know, your heaviest vessel you've launched, your maximum crew, the most complex, really neat stuff. And then it keeps track of every single thing that's happened in your space program, which is really neat, especially at the end when you kind of see where it all went bad. Okay, so how did we do that? How did that rocket take off by itself? How did it do science by itself? Well, let's look at the script and find out. All right, so this is our Kerbal Space Program root directory here, and then under ships we have a script library, and that's the one where all of our scripts go. They do not go in the game data folder. The boot folder is something that kOS is going to look for, and this is that boot.kOS or boot.ks that we assigned with the right click on the CPU that we did. We could have any number of files in here, naming them whatever we want, so that we could have different boot scripts for different situations. I also have a library of functions. You can see we have Ascent and Science. You saw those being downloaded. And I have a mission folder. And here is our test one. This is why I said that that space mattered, because of the way I've got my boot script set up. It is going to look for a folder with the same name as the craft, and within that folder it's going to look for a script called mission.ks. So let's pull that up and take a look at it. All right. So first thing you see is these require statements. These are functions that are defined in the boot script, and this requires Ascent and Science. And it will go and download those, and if it has successfully downloaded those, it will go through and hit main, because we've got all these true statements in here, and this function actually returns true or false depending on whether it is successful or not. So we're not actually going to go into the main function unless we are successful in downloading those. And the reason I have a true at the top and the true at the bottom like that is so that I can like comment out something I don't need and not have to change anything, and I still am syntactically correct there. So that's what that's all about. So if I failed in my downloading those stores, it'll say rebooting, and it'll keep doing that until you finally wise up and fix whatever's wrong. All right, here's our main function. The first function, or the first statement we have here, is what's known as a trigger in the Kerbal scripting language. And a trigger is something that is constantly being checked while the rest of the script is being executed, which is pretty neat. I've never seen anything like that in any different languages, although I don't have a great deal of experience with a lot of languages. I'm a mainframe batch COBOL programmer, so I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but I get by. Anyway, what this is doing is it's going to constantly be checking. It says, hey, is the altitude greater than 0? Which it's always going to be for the most part. And it's going to come in here and say, hey, is my t-sci variable, time science, we've defined that up there, started it out with 0, is that less than 1? If it is, do science. And then reset it to 20. If it's not less than 1, we're going to set it to whatever it currently is minus the elapsed time. That's another function. And then we'll return true. And by returning true, that resets this function, or this trigger, to where it can be reused. If you don't return true, it'll be a one-time thing. And sometimes you want things repeatable, and sometimes you don't. All right, and now we start talking about our phase. A phase is a variable that controls a mission. For each phase, we'll have a certain number of instructions. When those instructions are complete, we'll set the phase to the next phase and move on. In this case, we've only got one phase, and that's going to be our ascent phase. When we first boot up, our phase is going to be equal to 0. So the first thing we're going to want to do is set it to 1. And then we're going to say, hey, until this phase is 0, stay in here. And after it's done, it'll pop out of here. So we've set it to 1. It says if the phase is 1, perform the ascent script. We're able to perform the ascent script because we downloaded ascent.ks. And we'll take a look at that in a later episode. So we're going to do the ascent script, and once we're done with that, gear on. We don't need that. That's from a prior thing. I reuse the same scripts over and over again, so they've got a lot of stuff in them sometimes that I don't need. After we're done with ascent, we're going to set phase to 0, and then we're out of this loop here, and then we come down. We have another trigger where we're going to do science again if we're landed or splashed and happen to still be able to do science or splash. This is kind of a little overly optimistic for this particular mission, but when that's done, we say orders complete, and then wait until false basically means it just stays here forever. And that is our first script. Okay, so that was our first mission. Next time we'll take a look at the boot script and see how that drives everything that we saw in the mission script. So thanks for watching. See you next time.